let's do a review on how to do some decimal operations. First, let's look at how to add and subtract decimals. Let's do 1.35 plus, let's do it this way, plus 3.75. So you see up here in purple, I wrote that our number one thing we have to remember is to line up the decimals. Let's add a 0 there. So if I have 1.35 and I want to add it, I need to make sure my decimal is in the exact same place underneath. Let's actually make that a 2. Now, a lot of times it's easier for some people to put a 0 there as a place value. That is fine. It does not change your number. A 0 does not. So then you just add like usual. 0 plus 2 is 2. 5 plus 5 is 10. Carry my 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. Plus 7 is 11. 1, 2, 5. And then you just bring your decimal down. Okay? Now let's look at a subtraction problem. Let's say I do 18.356 minus, let's do 4.16. Okay? For space, I'm going to do that right here. So we're going to do 18.356 minus. Now remember, you have to line up that place value. You're going to do 4.16. Now remember in the step before I told you if you want to add a 0 at the end to hold its place, you are more than welcome to do that. I like to do that because it helps me do my math more seamless. So 6 minus 0 is 6. 5 minus 6. Well, I can't do that. So I need to borrow from the 3. Make that into a 15. 15 minus 6 is 9. 2 minus 1 is 1. 8 minus 4 is 4. 1 minus 0 is 1. So that would be my answer. So you should be fine with adding and subtracting decimal as long as you remember to line up your decimals. And if needed, you can put zeros as placeholders. Alright, let's look at multiplying decimals. So multiplying decimals, the one thing you need to remember is to count places. And you guys will see what I'm talking about in just a second. So you don't necessarily have to line up the decimals when you multiply. So I'm just going to do 3.75 multiplied times 1.6. Again, you see that I don't line up the decimals. It's not crucial when I'm multiplying. And then I just multiply out the normal way. 6 times 5 is 30. 7 times 6 is 42. Plus 3 is 45. 3 times 6 is 18. Plus 4 is 22. I go down to the next step. Remember, I add a 1 when I go over to my next, or add a 0 when I go over to my next digit. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 3 is 3. And then I just add those together. 0 plus 0 is 0. 5 plus 5 is 10. 1 plus 2 is 3. Plus 7 is 10. 1 plus 2 is 3. Plus 3 is 6. Now, my next step is to see where my decimals would fall. And this is what I mean by count places. I need to see how many spots are behind the decimal in the problem. So if I look, I'm going to do it in red so you understand. I've got 1, 2, 3 numbers behind my decimal in the problem. So therefore I need to have 1, 2, 3 numbers behind the decimal in my actual problem. So my answer is going to be 6.0, or I could just write 6. So let's do it one more time to make sure you have it. So over here I'm going to do 1.94 times 0.075. Again, you notice that I did not line up the decimals. Now I'm just going to multiply out. 4 times 5 is 20. 9 times 5 is 45. Plus 2 is 47. 1 times 5 is 5. Plus 4 is 9. Next line, I'm going to add a 0. 7 times 4 is 28. 7 times 9 is 63 plus 2 is 65. 1 times 7 is 7 plus 6 is 13. Now, I can add a 0 and keep going. I'd actually have to add 2, but I know that all of these numbers multiplied by 0 will just be 0. We'll go ahead and write them just so you understand what I'm doing. So I wrote the zeros because anything multiplied by 0 is just 0. And then I would add 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0. 7 plus 8 plus 0 is 15. 1 plus 9 is 10. Plus 5 is 15. 1 plus 3 is 4. And 1 plus 0 is 1. Now, remember my last step was to count the places. That's what you have to remember for multiplication. So up here I'm going to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 numbers behind the decimal. So now I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and drop my decimal there. So my answer is going to be 0.1455. I can put a 0 at the end, but since it's a placeholder, I don't have to. So now let's look at dividing decimals. So dividing decimals, what you need to remember is to divide and make decimals into whole numbers. So first I'm going to write this in the way that you guys know how to long divide. So if I'm doing 0.25 divided by 0.4 or 4/10, I'm going to write that with my 0.25 in the house. Now the hint I just gave you is that you have to divide by whole numbers. So I need to move that decimal over to where it's a whole. So that this decimal gets moved over once. But if I move it over once there, I also have to move it over once here. So I can rewrite this problem as 4 point, because you can see that I moved the decimals. Now I just do math. Does 4 go into 2? Well, no, so I'm going to put a 0. Don't forget to bring your decimal up. Does 4 go into 25? Well, yeah, it goes 6 times. 6 times 4 is 24. Bring it down to a 1. Now, at this point, I've already committed to making it a decimal, so I can't make it a mixed number. So I need to keep going until my fraction ends. So I'm going to add a 0, bring it down. How many times does 4 go into 10? Well, it goes in there twice. It goes in there twice, so 2 times 4 is 8. Subtract. Does 4 go into 2? No, so I have to add a 0 and bring it down. Does 4 go into 20? Absolutely. So my answer would be 0.625. Let's do another example. So writing this one, it would be 0.75 or 75/100 divided by 0.004 or 4 thousandths. All right. So first of all, you guys, I just told you that you have to make it into a whole number. So if I have to move my decimal over 3 spots here, I'll also have to move it over 3 spots on the inside. So this problem rewritten would look like this. Now, oftentimes it helps if you put the decimal up top at the same time, that way you don't forget it. So now let's just do our math. Does 4 go into 7? Yes, it goes into 7 one time. Bring down my 5. Does 4 go into 35? Yes, it goes in there 8 times. 8 times 4 is 32. 35 minus 32 is 3. Bring down my 0. How many times does 4 go into 30? Well, it goes in there 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. Do my subtraction. Now, note that this is on the other side of the decimal. So I bring down my 0. Does 4 go into 20? Yes, it goes in there 5 times, and I am now completely finished. Let's do one last example. Let's do 0.075 divided by 1.5. So I would write that like this. first thing I need to do is move my decimal because I want to make this into a whole number. This decimal is going to get moved over once. So if it gets moved over once there, it also has to get moved over once in the house. So this rewritten would look like this. Note where I put my decimal, okay? Because I've made that divisor into a whole number. So now let's go ahead and look at this problem. I know that 15 won't go into either 0 or 7. So I can just go ahead and put my zeros there. And I want to make sure that I remember to put that decimal on top. Now, prior knowledge will tell me that 15 goes into 75 5 times. It goes evenly. So my answer to this problem would be 0.05. What's important is that you remember how to move the decimals to make it into a whole number.